Greetings, YouTube. Today's article I'm discussing is from last month. Twitler's administration has two most revealing speeches weren't given by Twitler himself. Republicans control the White House, the Senate, and the Supreme Court. They have 27 governorships and governing trifectas in 21 states. By many conservatives, particularly Christian conservatives, believe they're being routed in the war that matters most, the post-Christian culture war. They see a diverse, secular left winning the future and preparing to eviscerate both Christian practice and traditional mores. And they see themselves as woefully unprepared to respond with the ruthlessness that the moment requires. So I would love anyone that considers themselves involved in this, in the sense that they feel they are Christian, evangelical Christian, losing the culture wars. I would love for them to read that passage and then step back for a second. And if you oppose a secular, diverse, liberal society, and you feel that you are insufficiently ruthless in that opposition, maybe you ought to look up the definition of Christian again. Maybe you want to look up that great compact that Christ said you have to worship, you have to love God and love your neighbor. Maybe you want to look up those two passages again. Because if you love your God and you love your neighbor, you're not going to be ruthless, let alone in opposition to a secular, diverse, liberal society. Because within that secular, diverse, liberal society, you have protections. Protections from the state and protections from your fellow citizens who might try to oppose, to oppress, or squash your opinions. That the wall of church between church and state is there to defend both church and state. And this is not a pie where you only get half of what's going on. It's a protection. The government can't adversely affect you. You can't adversely affect the government or people that aren't part of your church. But this is saying that the government cannot establish a church. It cannot impose a religious belief upon the nation, which protects you. You are protected. Your faith is being, the government is saying, no one can make you a believer in whatever, be forced to believe something else, or outlaw your faith as long as you are following secular law. So, for example, you are not an active terrorist group. If you're just a bunch of people that want to go pray at a pillar somewhere in a forest, that's okay as long as you've got permission to be on that land. You're not trespassing. Pray to that pillar. No one's going to stop you. You're protected. And you have the same protection as any person that's a member of a church that's much larger. You're like world-spanning religions. The desert traditions are often considered to be some of the big ones, and they are. But there are other big religions out there. Buddhism comes to mind right off the top of my head. And that seems to be a message lost on most American Christians, that the wall between church and state protects them as well as the secular world. And remember, secular people just want to be left alone. I'm not discussing anti-theists. There are anti-theists that are definitely out there who would like to make religion go away. But that's where the First Amendment comes in, and the government says, no, you can't do that. Remember that church and state wall? Here's the situation where the state is protecting you again. But there are just people who want to be secular, who want the government to be secular, want to live in a secular society, who are themselves theists, maybe even brethren of your own. They just could say, for example, be progressive liberal Christians. They do exist. They're not as common as the more conservative varieties, but there are progressive liberal Christians out there. And they want a secular society because they don't want to have your religion or your flavor of Christianity imposed upon them. Not to mention, It's interesting that every single time a Christian group says they would love to see, a Christian state, they'd like to live in a culture which is, Christianity has hegemony legally as opposed to just culturally. They never seem to pick which one. Do you know how many varieties of Christianity there are? There's lots and lots of them. So which one is it? Which one does the state pick? And if you're not in that one, what do? Do you just put up with it? Or would you prefer a secular, progressive, liberal worldview that's nice and diverse, that says everybody gets to play in the same place, everybody gets to get along, and no one gets to have their ball taken away. Everybody gets to just do their own thing. That's not losing the culture war. The culture war is BS started by pundits to get your eyes and ears on their programs and their advertising, sometimes their own personal products being sold. That's what that's about. It's not about really concern for you at all, because in a diverse, secular society in America, you continue to live forever. You continue to be able to practice your faith as long as America exists. You're safe because of that wall between church and state. And why don't they get that? I doubt that many evangelical Christians are going to have listened to this video all the way to this point. They're probably going to have noped out shortly after they realize that, I'm wearing a pentacle and an ankh, and I'm most definitely not Christian. But tell me, why don't you get that the wall between church and state protects you as much as it protects the government? Because that's what it's for. Protecting both sides from exploitation by the other. Which is why I endorse it. And why I look with great suspicion on anyone that is opposed to that idea and who's questioning the degree of ruthlessness that they may have towards it.